they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Shirley Chisholm. Bending Not Breaking, a Patreon exclusive. Hello there, I'm Sunshine Mayfield.
This is Ben Pruitt.
And we are the team that brings you Bending Not Breaking, but now we're doing things that's not necessarily Avatar related, because our wonderful producer, we think he needs more airtime.
Yeah.
And so for our patrons who are listening to this, one, thank you for supporting. Two, you're going to get some bonus episodes, so that's fun. And three, we're going to do the same thing that we do with Avatar, but because Max feels a little left out sometimes, we're going to let him choose what we're watching.
We're going to be inclusive.
And so we have Max Gongaware, our producer, but also now third host for this show. Whoa, 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 whoa.
It's good to be here.
You know that, like, you have to actually contribute
on these episodes.
We're doing them not for you. We're doing them because, one, we think you have valuable input, but also that we're watching stuff that you connect with, that you really enjoy, and that you get to share that joy with others.
Sure. Yeah, I understand that. Sorry, my first answer was short. I'll try to do better next time, Sunshine.
It just seemed like you were trying to be on brand, and I think that brand's going to change. Or maybe not change, but, be adaptable.
Like a delicate flower about to blossom, we just need you to open up a little bit more.
I'm here to serve.
How do you feel about being called a delicate flower?
I don't mind.
Cool.
I'm a pretty delicate guy. Y'all know that.
Yeah.
You just made a face.
What flower would Max be?
Ooh. That's an interesting question.
Probably the type you bake with, right?
When I think of delicate flowers, I think of orchids.
I think like a Japanese peace lily.
Orchids are really very, very, very fragile and need delicacy when working with them.
Well, we are watching a special movie.
We're doing a movie.
We're doing a movie.
A movie this time. We are breaking up into two parts. So there'll be two episodes.
Because we're really only good at talking about 20-minute segments at a time. So we're
stretching ourselves with a 45-minute segment here.
But Max, what are we watching? Why did you choose it? And how do we move forward from here?
So, fun fact, we've actually already watched it. So it sounded like you were saying, what are we watching? As if we hadn't seen it yet. But what we watched was The Terminal, starring Tom Hanks as Victor Navorsky, which has long been known as my favorite movie of all time. Everybody knows this, including our patrons. It's the greatest film ever created.
When did it come out? When did it come out, Max?
It came out in 2003. I don't know. Why does that matter?
I was just curious, just for a frame of reference.
It was a 2004 film.
2004, okay.
It was filmed largely in 2003, and then
yeah, gotcha.
Came out in 2004.
So tell us, like, why this movie? Why is this movie your favorite?
Why do you connect with it?
I just love people watching and feeling like I am a cheerleader of others. I like to feel like I am connected in other people's lives, even in a minuscule way. And I think those are all things that Victor does a nice job of doing throughout this movie. And he just embraces a lot of different challenges in a very admirable way.
So I'm hearing that you empathize a lot with Victor, the main character.
Absolutely. Plus, who doesn't love hanging out in an airport for hours, days, months at a time?
To be fair, I've hung out in an airport with Max before, and it's fun.
We had a good time.
Airports. Yeah, we had a good time.
You know,
I put it on my resume.
To be fair, I think hanging out with a friend is probably different than hanging out all alone when you don't speak the language that people are speaking.
Oh, I love alone time in an airport, let me tell you.
Tell us.
That's kind of the point. You get to tell us on these
I'm
episodes.
that guy who, I am not concerned that I showed up 3 hours early under the veil of I don't want to run into security, but really I'm just anxious to get into the terminal and hang out, maybe find something cool to eat, and look at my phone and pretend to be listening to things on my earplugs, but sometimes just overhearing conversations. You know?
You'd be a really good spy.
Who says I'm not?
So, like, you know, we can bridge those things together. Anyways.
Bridge of Spies, if you will.
Yeah. Max.
I don't get it.
It's a Tom Hanks movie, Ben. Ketchup. All right, as we're speaking of ketchup, which Max hates, let's jump in. Ben, I would normally ask you to recap at this point, but we're going to let Max do that
Max
today.
is going to be doing
So, Max,
all of the
you
Max's Choice recaps.
This is the uninformed recap.
You have...
This is super
you
informed.
should be an informed recap.
Super informed.
You should have a very informed
In fact,
recap.
you're more informed than either of us, considering how many times you've watched it.
All right, you've got to cover double the amount of time, like 45 minutes worth of plot into this movie. But I'm still only going to give you 30 seconds.
Great. I'm just gonna do the whole movie because I'm not sure when we decided the halfway point was.
Well, I'm going to stop you at 30 seconds anyway. So on your mark, get set, go.
Victor Navorsky is a man on a mission. His father is a fan of jazz music, but he's passed away recently. So sad. Victor decides to go from his home of Krakosia, which is presumably in Eastern
You've
Europe,
got 15 seconds.
to New York City to collect the signature of his favorite jazz musician. But alas, his country goes to war while he's in the air,
5 seconds.
and he's not allowed into New York soil.
You haven't even started the movie.
2, 1.
Awesome! Well, y'all.
He's stuck in the terminal. And drama and comedy ensues.
You'll get a chance to give a recap for the back half during part 2 of this.
Part 2, I'll do the rest of the movie. Yeah.
Part 2, you get the rest of the movie. So remember where you left
That's
off.
basically the first half of the movie.
Like,
That's
no,
the first
no,
5
it's not.
minutes of the movie.
It's not even. It's like
The beauty of a movie in which some guy is stuck in one place for the whole time is basically I just recapped the movie.
So you have a plotless movie as your favorite movie of all time?
I don't know. I don't love the tone in which you said that, but yeah.
There's actually, I'm incredibly happy. We picked the lens of inclusion for this one.
for the first half.
For the first half of this movie, and I think that we're going to actually end up having a lot to talk about. And so Max picks the lens for this, and so well done, Max.
I'm good at what I do.
I think we're going to have some good conversation.
To be determined.
Are we ready to just jump on in?
Let's do it.
Let's go through the gate and head to the terminal, and let's begin, right? Max, that's copyright. You can't just whistle things like
It's
that.
fair use under 30 seconds, John Williams.
All right.
Well, there you go.
So, what was something that popped out to... And let's start with Max. What's something that popped out to you as a moment of inclusion or something that you wanted to highlight?
Sure. So Victor Navorsky is a man on a mission. He arrives at the airport wearing a little cap that we don't see for the rest of the movie. He presents his passport to a customs agent who scans it several times, and something weird is afoot. The scanner just is not reacting.
I don't know
in
if
the
I need
way.
to stop him. Like, what's the
can't tell.
where's the
I can't
moment?
tell
like,
if he's
it's
like what
just
he's
still,
doing.
If he's like still just planning on recapping, or if he's
Is this-
actually talking about this individual moment.
So basically, what I'm saying here is that the custom agent. Yes, the lens is inclusion, but I think what we may end up speaking about is examples of a lack of inclusion here and there and everywhere throughout the first half of this film. And we see it firsthand when this customs agent does not do a great job of being fully transparent with Victor of what's going on here. To be fair, there is a language barrier. But essentially what happens is he's like, I don't know what's going on here, and then they have to like take him into a different office. And you see Victor's face is like, oh, this must all be normal. But they take him into this office, and actually before that, they put him in a literal box of stanchions.
Yeah, they literally square him off.
And that's a moment that I wrote down because I think it's worth highlighting. In a moment where you are in the building, right? How often do we talk about being included? Like, we invited them in. We invited someone to this party. We invited someone into this organization. We invited them in. But then do we put them in a literal box that excludes them from everybody else? And so I think the point that I'm trying to make is you can invite someone in, but if you are not creating a space that is welcoming, that is allowing them to be a part of it,
right?
Or safe, then they're not actually included in what you're doing. So as an organization, you can say like, oh, we've got a really diverse group of people. It's wonderful. But if the behavior of your organization is not creating a welcoming or safe environment, like, you're still not doing what you need to be doing.
Correct.
And so I think that's what this moment brought up for me.
I also want to go to a little bit before that. Like when we see all of these customs agents, like this is like as the credits are still rolling, I feel like all the customs agents are welcoming people in. And I say welcoming loosely because it doesn't seem like they're very welcoming, right? They're none of them. I didn't see
They're
one.
outwardly looking for reasons to keep people out of the country.
Yeah, I didn't see one person smile that was a customs agent throughout the entire movie.
At the opening credit sequence, you've got Frank Dixon, played by Stanley Tucci. Little touch of the tooch.
That's one.
There's one.
We see this scene where he like sees this group of Asians coming into the States, and they are presumably headed to Disney World. And what he says is, "When was the last time you saw a group of Asians coming into the States, coming into JFK, FDR, True American,
With no cameras.
with no cameras?" And like, so clearly, what this man is looking for is not like how can our airport feel welcoming, welcome all these people. Instead, what he's looking for is, who can I find to
Who is breaking the mold?
Well,
Who is breaking the stereotypes that I
and
have
here's-
built into my head?
And I want to say, what happens when jobs are specifically meant to exclude people?
Precisely. That's
Right?
an interesting question.
So, is it impossible if a job or a culture or of a job is meant to be exclusionary or meant to serve a very singular purpose that is not necessarily a welcoming one, is it really tough for the employees of that job or the culture to be one that is welcoming? Are those customs agents supposed to be somewhat intimidating?
Well, and let me be real. Like I travel a couple times a year, not clearly with COVID, but like when I travel, when I come back to the country, I feel really nervous going into customs, and I haven't done anything wrong. Like I come up to a customs agent and I'm worried that I'm gonna get pulled over and pulled aside, and I'm not like I'm a white cisgender male who shouldn't be worried, right? I don't do anything wrong, I don't think, but like I still worry when I go up to this agent because it's nerve-wracking. It's a like I don't love it.
Isn't that a taste of a feeling that like so many other individuals
Oh my
have
God,
to handle
that have it
all
so
the
much
time?
worse, right? And it's just it's so
Well, I think it's also fascinating. Like, I feel like that is not, like Victor's expectation is America is supposed to be this welcoming melting pot of inclusion. He goes in and he's like, oh, this is all normal. Like, he's ready to go and
going to New
get
York.
that autograph and then get back on a plane to Krakosia. So it's very interesting to hear like our jaded perspective of American customs agents versus what is the perspective of somebody coming from an Eastern European country who's been told about this American dream, and just even how much that has changed, I wonder, since 2004 to 2020.
a lot, probably.
Yeah. So really, I think the big takeaway from this moment is you can't just bring people in. You've got to create the environment. You've got to create a welcoming space, and you've got to really look and see what's the intention of what you're doing, and how are you intentionally being inclusive. Not just saying like, oh, well, we invited them. Well, if you were, it's probably a terrible analogy. You're, 16-year-olds throwing a birthday party. Well, we invited someone. They decided not to come. It's like, well, they get picked on every time they show up to the group. Like, why would they show up? Why would they go?
Well, I think that's such an important thing to think about in terms of what the difference between being inclusive is and like, I'm going to preach this as a value that we have. We are inclusive. So we're going to invite people to our group or our thing or whatever we're doing. But the invitation alone is not nearly. That is like step 101, like, except not even. Like, that's kindergarten. Like, you should have
performative activism, right?
Yeah, there's a great essay by Robert Fulghum. It's called Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten.
Love it.
It's phenomenal. You should read it. But it's like one of the things that he learned in kindergarten is be nice, right? Be kind to people, and like share cookies and milk, like take a nap, like all the good things. But I think that being inclusive and inviting someone to the party is kindergarten. What we are like adults, or we are people who have a higher capacity than we are exhibiting. And so we need to think about, what does our room look like for these people that we are inviting? Is this a community where we are being inclusive in our actions in what we're doing, not just how we're bringing people in. And I think that's just so important. It's just, and you know what? Airports don't do a good job of it.
They do not.
I think that's an interesting way to think about it, because as an adult and as somebody who's lived a little bit more life than a kindergartner, yes, when I get invited to places, that is them being nice. That is them throwing an example of, okay, here's something I learned in kindergarten. I can invite people. That's a way to be nice. But as adults, just getting invited somewhere is not enough. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that's just a pity invitation.
For real.
And then, like, even when I'm at the party or at the happy hour or whatever it may be, I'm like, I still feel like an outsider. It's like, wow, they really invited me to this. That was very nice of them. But I don't really believe that they like want me to be there, or, you know, when I leave, they're gonna go have their post happy hour, or, and that sometimes that's a Max thing where that's my own story that I'm telling myself, but it's also like on them a little bit too. Like there's something missing here, that they're not creating a sense of belonging.
Well, again, it's intention versus impact, right? We can intend for people, everyone's welcome here, everyone's invited, versus impact where only a few people, a select group may come, right? And so the impact is you only have a select group, which means yet something's missing, right? Intention versus impact. What matters? Impact.
Absolutely. And Max, you said earlier, you said language was a barrier of inclusion, so I want to kind of
we should talk about that.
What are more barriers to inclusion that we saw in the first segment of the terminal? So I had language as one, right? We see that anytime he tries to communicate, whether it's with Stanley Tucci, where Stanley Tucci has to use a potato chip bag as Krakosia to represent Civil War.
Well, not only that, but like he also used an apple where Victor was like, "Oh, the Big Apple, New York," and then he proceeded to destroy Krakosia with the Big Apple. Correct. So does he think then that Krakosia, like, clearly it didn't land at all?
It wasn't a great analogy,
but like it was bad. Like, does the Big Apple, like, I don't know.
Other things I wrote down is societal norms, right? If you're not aware of the norms of the society that you are in, that's going to create a barrier for inclusion.
I think a major barrier is finances, money.
Correct.
Especially in this environment.
Well, especially in a capitalistic
Well, also,
entity,
they literally cannot convert his Krakosian money into American money. Like, Krakosian money, like, there was no way for even if he did have pocket money, he couldn't use it because Krakosia doesn't have a government right now, and therefore there's no exchange rate and this and that. So they give him food vouchers, but he doesn't know what to do with that.
And he loses them promptly.
Well, because another societal norm might be that he, left his food voucher, like he didn't put them in a pocket, he left them on a bench, right? I was half expecting for someone to grab them.
That's what I was expecting.
But they fall away, but then they get thrown away, and he tries to go dig through the trash, and no, you
do
can't
you have an appointment?
Terrible.
Not a great accent.
That was bad.
I did my best.
It was like a Jafar, like I don't. Anyways,
Jafar.
But like, hey, you don't push down somebody.
None of us should be trying to do an Indian accent.
Right. Correct.
So his bad, like I don't think that was really an attempt to do an Indian accent.
No.
That's how bad it was.
But he tries to help. He tries to help the other person load their suitcase, but breaks the suitcase in the process.
Yep. Intention versus impact.
Correct. Anxiety, fear. I wrote down sarcasm. And I think I wrote that down for when he tries to go through the trash. And do you have an appointment? Oh, come back on Tuesday. That's when I'll let you dig through my trash. Clearly sarcasm. But can we talk about, like, sarcasm? Can we take a moment for sarcasm and how that is one of the most exclusive things you can do?
Sarcasm is probably one of my biggest unfortunate things that I do.
And we do it. I do it still.
Oh, me too.
Do you?
But sarcasm itself, is it when you use it against someone, you are inherently calling them stupid based off of the way that you're reacting to them. It is in no way, shape, or form meant to create connection. It is only meant to drive disconnection.
Especially when, like, you're just meeting somebody. I think that over time, like, you and I have known each other for over 10 years. So we can get a banter of sarcasm going back and forth with each other.
Yes, and it doesn't bother. I would say most of the time it doesn't bother us. And it still is more of, I would say, even in those moments, is more likely to be a divisive measure than one of connection. Like, we have a strong enough relationship that it can weather that, and it's not necessarily going to bother us. But if it was something that continued to happen all the time, over time, it would eventually drive a wedge.
One of our favorite games to play with each other is you see a movie on TV that stars Tom Hanks, and it's The Terminal, but you'll come up and say, "Oh, I love Bridge of Spies."
Correct.
Is that sarcasm? Kind of, right? But that's not a...
But I'll even say I do that all the time, and it is to technically see if I can, like...
Sunshine's the biggest troll on the internet.
But
he certainly is not.
I'm not. But I do that to see if I can... Honestly, it comes from can I prove my movie knowledge over you and convince you that you're wrong based off of a perception of how well I know this movie.
Again, that is an act of, hey, I know more than you.
Correct. It's an act of disconnection. So even when I play that game, I think that I'm not being the best version of myself that I can be. And so I think that's my argument for sarcasm.
Well, it's just there's so much.
To be clear, I'm not pro sarcasm. I'm just, there are examples where I think it's acceptable.
Acceptable versus what builds connection, right? I think it's one of those things where, like, there are plenty of friendships in which I will utilize sarcasm, but again, if I were to really filter everything that I did, I probably wouldn't use it. But it's also one of those things where, like, where it is certainly not acceptable and should not be used are
with a stranger,
teachers,
yeah,
with students, like where there is a power over situation, any sort of hierarchy, there should not be sarcasm used, right? I think that has no place, and I think it causes problems.
I vividly remember a 5th grade teacher asking me what is wrong with me, and if I'm giving the most generous assumption, I think she said that as a joke. And to this day, I vividly remember it and don't feel good about it. And that was 20 years ago.
And this is another good example of intention versus impact, right? Like, when we intend to, like, sometimes our intention with sarcasm is to, like, let's, poke fun. Oh, when I poke fun, I laugh. Laughing is good. Laughing builds connection. But you have to think about who's laughing and at whose expense. Right, and I think that's what really matters to think about for sure. And like, talking about a language barrier, sarcasm on top of a language barrier. Of course, Victor's not going to catch sarcasm when there's a language barrier.
He was just grateful that he understood the word Tuesday.
Correct.
Monday.
Aye.
Tuesday. Wednesday. Like that's when he heard Tuesday, he was like, "Oh, that's a day of the week. I know the
Wednesday.
order." Yeah.
I can figure out what Tuesday is.
Like, it's just.
Props to him for learning the language the way he did by picking up 2 different Sky Mall magazines or whatever they were, or like New York info maps, and being able to compare and contrast to learn words. And he's there in the story for 9 months, but this was based off of a guy who was in a terminal for 13 years or something like that.
I don't know. That seems like a long time.
Excessive.
I'll do my research, but continue talking.
So, okay. So, I'm curious, Max. Answer me this. Why doesn't this airport, which is an extremely well-traveled airport...
It's theoretically JFK.
Yes. Why doesn't this airport have a interpreter on staff ready to go?
I don't know why. You would think they would. They're in the biggest city in the world, the greatest city in the world, according to Lin-Manuel Miranda. And they're like... You would think they would have people available at any given moment, or certainly within the course of several hours or a couple days, that they could have somebody available. And I think even in the opening sequences, like Frank Dixon is talking to one of his cohorts saying, "When can we have an interpreter here?"
He did.
And then it just never happened, I guess.
It never happened, and they
had
fair,
to... Krakosia isn't a real place, so...
But he was speaking a language. You even heard him speak a language later in the movie where he's... Victor has to act as an interpreter. Like, so not only am I holding power over this person, but now I'm going to use him, and, like, talk about, like... that just felt grody to me. Like,
Yeah.
pay your people, pay an interpreter, because you clearly need one. Why do they not have one on staff? That's like, as Stanley Tucci, hey, here's my advice for Stanley Tucci. Hire interpreters, pay people for that kind of work.
That's for the real Stanley Tucci or just the...
No, for his character.
Frank Dixon.
Yes.
The movie was inspired by a man who lived in a terminal in France after being expelled from Iran from 1988 to 2006.
Oh my gosh.
That's 18 years if you're keeping track at home.
And he wrote the book The Terminal Man about his story, which is what they made the movie off of.
I didn't realize that.
18 years.
That sounds unfortunate. Where did he sleep? Did he sleep in
And
chairs?
he stayed in the
Gate
terminal
67,
lounge.
my dude.
Gate 67.
So, oh god. Okay. All right.
One thing I want to talk about that came up for me is what is the importance of when it comes to being included to making a space for yourself. And the reason I ask that is we see him start to create a home by making his own bed and finding a place for him and finding a corner of this terminal that could be his. And so I wonder if that's something that's just like, no, you really need other people to help make that space for you. Or if it's sometimes you got to make your own space and say, I'm here. You need to accept me. And how are we going to make this happen?
Squatters' rights.
I think that maybe it depends on the person. Like I think the little soliloquy I told earlier, that was an example of I am not the person who feels comfortable creating a space for myself and feeling confident within that space. Like I need help being included. Whereas Victor, whether it's cultural differences or whatever it may be, he or desperation. I mean, he was able to create that space for himself and maybe blissful confidence, confidence driven by blissful ignorance, whatever it may have been. He certainly was able to create that space for himself, which motivated him to accomplish a lot while he was in the terminal. But I don't know if it just depends on the person.
I think what bothers me is that there was no follow through on act of the airport. And so I understand not providing someone a place to sleep for a day or even 2 days. But at what point should Frank should he have stepped in and said, okay, this is taking longer than we expected. What can we do to ensure this person has basic human dignity?
Well, he did the opposite. He said, this is taking longer than expected. Why hasn't he just left so that I can be rid of him?
And I'm saying, and the inclusive thing to do is to provide, right? It is like you are responsible in this situation. You are the head of this administration that is making decisions on how we're working with this. I feel like, tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's incumbent upon him to utilize his resources to provide basic human dignity and things that will help him be human.
So here's what I'm going to say. Don't be Frank Dixon, right? He didn't kick him out or force him out or find a way to arrest him inside of his terminal because he knew it was wrong and he knew that it would look bad. But he didn't do what was right. So it was inaction. And I think this is where you highlight where inaction is not okay.
He was trying to trap Victor into leaving the airport.
Correct.
By telling him, hey, this door is going to be unattended by guards.
I wait.
And my interpretation was he was going to Victor was going to leave the airport.
And he was going to arrest him.
And Frank was going to call for his arrest.
Correct.
How?
So that's not inaction to me. That is malicious.
It's a bad move.
Yeah.
That's bad.
And then also look at it when he found ways to make money.
He prevented it from happening.
He actively tried to starve him out.
I think the carts thing is maybe the reason this is my favorite movie of all time.
Well,
is just the genius of Victor notices that when you return the little cart, you get a quarterback.
Yep.
And he also notices that for most people, they don't care about getting that quarterback. So they just leave the carts strewn about the terminal. So Victor now is collecting carts around the airport and turning them all in stacks of 20 at a time so he can get
A Happy Meal.
$5,
yeah.
$5 worth of food from Burger King. Sponsor us, by the way.
Speaking of Burger King, right? I think that
They make an inclusive move.
yes. So the cashier at Burger King is pretty inclusive. Like Victor goes up to them and puts money on the counter. He doesn't order anything. They just be like, "This is what we can give you," and then they do. So I feel like that's a really inclusive act to say, "Wow, okay."
There might be a language barrier. You want food. We're gonna help you bridge this gap by giving you the food that we think will be best suited for you in this moment.
Based off what you're paying, right?
Hopefully, maybe he gave feedback by being like, ugh, gross. And then maybe like, we don't see any of that, but I hope.
We see him starving. And so
my generous assumption is that like, if he was like, gross, that they'd be like, great. When he shows up tomorrow, we won't give him the chicken fries, right? Like that's, I don't know if those were in existence in 2004, but.
Well, and so let me ask y'all, what's the generous assumption then on why the Tooch created transportation liaison for passenger assistance?
He's up for a promotion. I don't know if that's the generous assumption, but I think that his supervisor has announced his retirement and has told him, "Oh, you are the person I am planning to recommend in the next couple weeks to take my job." So I think he's up for promotion, trying to think of some creative ideas, and meanwhile, like Victor is the thorn in his side. So he's like, "Well, this is the clear challenge that I'm presented with right now, but if I can come up with a creative solution, it's gonna be that extra step toward my promotion."
I think my issue is that I based off of what you're saying, I wonder if the Tooch is rewarded for like finding and nabbing criminal behavior. I wonder if it's like a check on his scorecard, in which case luring this guy Victor into a criminal act and catching him is a tick on his scorecard.
When if that's the case, then it goes back to what we were talking about. If the job is designed to be exclusive, then your behavior is going to do that.
Well, it's more than that. It's like it talks about like another analogy might be if a
Which
police
means you should
officer
just not choose that job, right? Like that's where we are.
Yeah, another example of that is if a police officer has like a quota for the amount of tickets they have to issue for speeding or something along those lines, right? Which that's pretty much banned, I think, but I hope. But it's like, you know what I mean? Like that's
then they're going to do what they can to get the quota.
But they're going to do, like, even if they're, doing wrong things in order to get that quota, they're going to do what they can because their performance and evaluation is based off of that. And so we need to be very careful about what are the carrots and sticks in our lives that are rewarding us and punishing us? Like what the carrots that we want to get and the sticks that are whacking us when we make mistakes, what are they causing us to do? And is that something that's influencing our behavior? Because if so, we need to evaluate those and figure out how we can change them.
Yes.
Because I don't ever want to work in a job where I'm being rewarded for something that isn't humane, isn't protecting human rights and human dignity.
Well, and here's the back to that, right? Like, I have to have this job or a job to survive, and if this is the only one that'll hire me, it's the one I have to take right now, and hopefully I can afford to leave it later. Which gets us to a point of saying, like, let's make sure people aren't ever at that stage in their life. Let's take care of all the things that we can to take care of people so they don't feel like an immoral job is the only one they can take for their own survival.
I want that for people. I want that.
I agree. Max, is there another big moment of inclusion for you that you'd like to highlight?
I think for me, Victor's interactions with Officer Torres is a really good example of somebody becoming more inclusive over time. His first interaction is he's filling out this form that he thinks is going to get him into the country. And
not the blue form.
And she basically says...
Not the green form.
She basically says, wrong form,
light
you idiot.
Green form.
Then he fills out another form. She says, nope, still wrong form. You need to fill out the light green form. And
to be fair, she's pretty terse with him up front. Like, she's not nice.
Well, and I think that goes to, if you're being given the most generous assumption, how often is she dealing with people who...
Don't get it.
Right? Who she's having to repeat over and over again. And maybe she is not doing the best job of giving them the most generous assumption because... hey, this guy wasn't the same guy who came up to me 5 minutes ago and pulled up the wrong form.
This
I
is
should
why I
probably
don't
keep
like
a different
going
tone of
to the
voice.
DMV.
I've never met someone incredibly happy. I try to be very pleasant when I go into places like that because everyone else is very upset and understandably frustrated, and I try to be a lighthouse. I try to be a little glimmer of hope. Try to be a little glimmer of hope, and just be pleasant.
But ultimately, to get back
Inclusion
to
is like a lighthouse.
yes, it lights the way for others when they're feeling.
When the way is dark.
Yeah.
You know.
But so he
Little
has this.
lighthouse.
He has this interaction with Officer Torres every day. She's played by Zoe Saldana, who you know from such films
Center
as,
Stage.
What's the one with Ashton Kutcher and Bernie Mac?
I don't know. But she's been in a lot of stuff.
Guess who?
Yeah, that's her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Drumline.
She's also in Avatar, the Blue People movie.
Drumline.
Indeed.
But so
She is
he
in
has
Drumline.
this interaction with her every day.
Star
And
Trek.
As his English gets better and better, he starts to like pick up some of his Krakosian charm is better picked up by English speakers. But one of the first smiles he receives in the movie is when he explains, like Officer Torres says, I'm not going to accept you. Like, I'm not going to give you the green sticker or green stamp that you're looking for. Why do you come back here every single day? And his perspective is, well, you have a red stamp and you have a green stamp.
He's 50-50.
So my chances of going to New York are 50-50. And finally, like, she cracks a smile and is like, that is a beautiful way of looking at it, Mr. Navorsky. And I feel like that is the first time that he is like, not welcomed, because obviously she still gives him the red stamp, but that he feels like he belongs to a relationship within the terminal.
And I think that's an important moment because I think it highlights the fact that when we create moments of connections for other people and create a place for other people to belong, we create a place for us to belong as well. So when we create a place for other people to belong, we're creating a space for us to belong in those moments as well. And we see that a couple times, because I took note, it was one of the biggest points that I walked away with this front of the movie is the moment that Victor helps Amelia by pointing out the wet floor sign, right? He creates a moment of connection, takes care of her, and creates a bond.
Sensible heels.
Payless shoes.
But because of that, she is now more accepting of him because of that moment and is more likely to be responsive in that way for him. So he's creating that moment for himself as well.
It still takes her some time. Like,
it does. It's not.
He has
it's
to
not
remind,
perfect.
later he has to remind her of that interaction that they had after he was eavesdropping her phone conversation. But yes, that moment what is the TED Talk, the lollipop moment.
Correct.
That was that slippery floor, wet floor moment was Victor's lollipop moment.
Well, and then he helps Enrique and Officer Torres create a bond.
Absolutely, he does.
And so he's get this little moments of connection. He asks Amelia open-ended questions when they're talking for the first time and lets her speak about herself and listens to what she's saying.
Catherine Zeta-Jones.
She dips beneath lasers.
Oh.
And all that jazz.
But I think it is a really important thing that when you, again, and I really want to highlight it, when you take
I
time
love Sweeney Todd.
to create moments,
I love Kiss Me Kate.
when you take time to create connection.
All that jazz is from Chicago.
Well,
It's also
y'all
about it's
listen.
about jazz. This movie is about jazz. That was a good connection, and you ruined it.
All that jazz is a different movie.
I know my musicals. That's Kiss Me Kate, my dude.
Y'all,
Anyways.
we need
It's
to.
too darn hot.
I
we
just
need a
talked about
bending-
sarcasm,
bending
y'all.
that's not. I wasn't being sarcastic. He was being sarcastic.
Anyways,
Never.
when we create moments of connection, and jokes aside, because I think this is one of the biggest takeaways for me. This thing is when we create places for other people to belong, we are creating that sense for us. And I think that is incredibly important.
That's true.
I think we have to make sure that other people belong so we can belong.
I
Yeah,
think I've
'cause
heard
otherwise-
y'all on this podcast before. Like when you are feeling, and I do this too. Like if I'm feeling down about something, or if I'm feeling like I don't, like I am not feeling the sense of belonging that I want to feel in a given moment. Like I take it upon myself to reach out to somebody who, like, I've heard y'all speak about that. Is what can I do to create a sense of belonging for somebody else, so that then I will kind of receive the reciprocals of that.
Yeah, I mean,
I
and
really
don't
hope
know-
I said that. That'd be cool.
It's not selfish. It's not selfish to say I want to belong and create a space for that, because sometimes we have to take that onus on ourselves. We hope that other people are doing that for us as well. We hope we have other communities to belong to, but if we are creating them for other people by the way we interact with them, by the way we speak with them, by the way that we engage with them, and the tone of voice that we use, and all of these things that we've talked about before, and creating a safe container, if we can do that, we're going to feel that ourselves. And I think that's just really important, and I love that Victor does that throughout the first half of this movie.
Yeah.
And through the second half, we just looked at it through a different
and
lens.
we end on a scene where like his job is his means of making money via coins and the carts has been taken. Enrique Cruz has just given him an option, like this is how he's going to get fed, right? And so now he has option of food, and so now he goes back to his home in Gate 67. And before that, he gets to this spot where it just needs work, and we see that he has a skill. Right, and so he has a skill where he is good at carpentry and building, etc. And he starts working, and he starts just fixing this wall. He sees materials there, and he starts, and he, all of a sudden, this crew shows up and was like, "What are you doing?" And they see his work, and they see this, and how often are we given the opportunity? He's been applying to jobs for like several scenes now. And how often are we given the opportunity to demonstrate our skills? Like, interviews don't really do it. Like, how often are we given the opportunity to really demonstrate skills in order to get work? In order to be included, if you will.
He doesn't even get that opportunity, right?
No,
he doesn't
not
even
at
get
all.
the call because of employer biases of what he's
Exactly.
doing. And I think that's,
Yes.
as we were talking about inclusion, we see a microcosm of this American ideal of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you can succeed and you can make it in this
Myth.
country. And the reality is, all right, he doesn't have a phone, and phones cost money and he can't afford that and he doesn't necessarily know how to use that, and so he is not able to do that, right? He doesn't have an address because he lives in the terminal, and he might not be able to afford a home even if he could get out of the terminal, so he doesn't have an address to get a job, and so that's a barrier. He doesn't have the opportunity to show the skills that he has, except per happen chance. Like, he had to wait on a fluke, on luck, for that to show up for him. And he has to deal with the biases of the employers that are hiring him.
Yeah.
All of these things are barriers that block this myth of if you just work hard, because he tried. He tried to get the carts, and a barrier was put in front of him.
Yeah.
And so this idea that you can do this and succeed in the American dream is possible, but we're seeing it really isn't. And the data would also support that it's not. You're not able to achieve that and get out of your economic social status.
Exactly.
Right?
And
That
we
it's
very
proven
clearly
that's
see
not
that
allowed.
he has the skill set to do work. He's clearly dedicated. He clearly has knowledge. He's clearly, especially in his construction role, like he is seen on camera, like dictating things, saying, no, we should do this instead. Like he is very clearly capable, but he's never given the chance. But just by happenstance, they see him do this and they start paying him under the table to make. I think that was a radical act of inclusion. And I do think that was intentionally trying to like steal a worker from another crew. We see that and we hear that. But a radical act of inclusion is being willing to pay somebody under the table for the work that they're doing in order to ensure they're getting paid. Right?
Sure, yeah. Absolutely. And the employer is going to get punished for that,
it
and
seems
which
risky,
is another barrier, right?
But it's like that's
or he
like,
could be punished for that.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of barriers to inclusion, y'all. How do we start working on destructuralizing those barriers so that we can more freely include each other and be kind?
Absolutely. All right. Any other moments that are big on inclusion that anyone else wants to highlight? No? Going once? Going twice? I've got one more.
Oh, boy.
Can we just talk about how a nice, simple wave and a smile can mean the world to someone? We get that moment where Amelia wasn't waving to Victor, so there's definitely heartbreak, but how much joy did he feel in the moment where he thought she was waving to him? And that was such a simple gesture of just waving and smiling. And he felt so good and included and felt seen. And that was all she did was wave and smile.
Yeah, that's great. And I've said out loud to y'all, like, the Amelia Victor storyline is one I just don't need. But
That's also true.
This is your favorite movie, Max.
nothing's perfect.
We'll talk
right?
about it next episode. It slows down a lot when they start pushing the romantic thread.
But I will give Amelia some credit. She does, even though she wasn't waving to Victor in that moment, when they eventually do have that conversation at the bookstore. I think it's a Borders bookstore. Not
What happened to Borders? Bought out by Amazon, right?
Sponsor us.
Barnes and Noble's bottom. Maybe it was Amazon. I think it was Barnes and Noble bottom.
They're gone.
But like they have a very good conversation about Napoleon, like who to thunk. But like she does a good job of like welcoming him, and before she knows it, she's asking him on a date, and like, man, that's a way of including somebody in something. So I will give her a lot of credit for even moving beyond that accidental wave interaction into like an actual conversation, and I think that their interactions give Victor the confidence he needs to go start painting and constructing his part of the home so that he can show it off to Amelia, which then is what gives him the opportunity to show off his skills to get that job. Like,
Yeah.
Amelia, I don't love the storyline, but it does set off some gears in action in some of the
You're right.
storylines I
You're
really do
right.
like.
Interesting. I love how those are connected.
All right. Anything else we want to highlight before we go into our devotion and our
Devotion.
gratitude? All right. We will take a quick break, and then we'll be right back.
Cool. And we're back for our devotion and our gratitude. And
Yeah, we are.
we still are bending, not breaking. And
Yes, we are.
we are very much interested in continuing our goal of maintaining and creating balance in the world. And one of the things that helps us do that is continue with this ritual that we've started on doing our devotions through the lenses of each element. And so we're going to continue that. We're going to do an elemental devotion still. And so we're going to start with fire, and our Patreon episodes will proceed on from here on using the avatar cycle. And so to start us off, who wants to go first? Who wants to talk about inclusion and fire mixed together?
I'll jump in mine. Mine's going to go back to making sure that we are not just inviting people into spaces, but that we are creating a space that's welcoming for them to be invited into.
That's what mine's based off on.
And I am going to work with my organization that I currently work in to make sure that our hiring policies are ones that are welcoming and actually allowing us to hopefully break down some of these barriers that might be required.
Yeah.
And so that's my goal in creating a warmer, welcoming space, and making sure that we're creating, not just saying we're inclusive, but actually doing that.
That's a big goal you have right
It
there.
is a big one, and it's probably not one that I can accomplish in a week, but I have the steps to start, and we've kind of said it. How do you eat the biggest thing at the table? And it's one bite at a time. So
Yeah.
that's my plan.
So mine's similar to yours, but I'm approaching it differently. I have been binge watching Survivor over the course of COVID-19, and I'm on season 32.
It's so good. It's so bad.
Yeah.
But it's so good.
Yeah, all those things. But one of the things that they really focus on is fire gives you life in Survivor. And it's interesting because they are all given, after their first tribal council, a flint. And that flint is a way for them to start fire. And so there's a lot of layers involved in this, so bear with me. I'm going to try and do it quickly. But first of all, you have to know how to use a flint. How do you strike flint and to make fire? Because if someone without that knowledge, they're not going to know what to do with a piece of metal. What are they going to do with flint? And so they're given flint, but they're also given flint attached to magnesium. And magnesium is very flammable, but it's not flammable if you just put it into a fire. It's flammable in those little shavings are very, very flammable.
That's right.
And so you have to be able to shave the magnesium in. And so giving someone here's some flint, go make fire, is not necessarily, that's kindergarten level. It's okay, here's your flint, here's your magnesium, here's how you use it. You should shave it. Make sure that you shave it into a nest of coconut husk so that it's nice and flammable and it lights up, that's not damp. There's so many layers to doing it right and building a fire. And I feel like inclusion should be easy, but it's not. inclusion should be easy, but it's not. And so in order to be inclusive, we have to, how do we break down those steps? And so for me, I want to go back to the beginning and figure out what those steps are and how can I break that down into how do I build a roaring fire of inclusion. I really want that in my life. And what I'm breaking that down into where my gap is I am not reaching out to people in COVID. So during COVID times, I'm a hermit naturally. I'm super introverted, and so like I'm anti-people a lot of the time.
Anti-people?
Yeah, I gave a speech in high school about how I hate people. I've changed, I've grown, but moral of the story is like in my not good space, mental space, I run away from people, and so I tend to be pretty much anti-inclusive, and so I need to figure out during COVID, like I need to think, who are the people that need me to reach out? Who can I reach out to that needs someone in their life, someone to just talk to? And like I think about my mom. I haven't talked to my mom. She has to call me. Like, how can I call my mom and just be like not make her do all the work to keep our relationship intact? But it's not just my mom. It's like, who are the friends that I'm not reaching out to and being inclusive of? And so that's like that. I'm sorry, that was a really long explanation, but like, what am I doing this week? I'm reaching out to people and doing my part of our relationship by inviting them in. That's what I'm trying to do.
That's great. Mine is going to maybe be similar, but I think it's different enough that I can still do it. But this is a new exercise for me. Yeah. I don't really think about fire very often. But what is fire good for? It creates light. It creates warmth. And fire is really, really great when it is controlled. And you are able to keep it under control and make it do what you want it to do. You don't want a fire that spreads all over the place because that gets dangerous fast.
True.
So when I think about
Very
inclusion
fast.
Through that lens, I think that I have a habit of I'm guilty of when I am painting a picture of inclusion in my mind, it is, let me invite all of the people to this thing that I'm hosting or this thing that I'm trying to do. And really that's just like throwing embers anywhere and seeing where it will light. And I don't know that that is actually an act of inclusion. So I think what I would like to try to do a better job of is send intentional and specific invitations to people. Just as Ben said, he wants to intentionally reach out to people that he wouldn't otherwise reach out to. But I think that I could do a better job of, instead of putting out a tweet that says, going to the ballpark later, anybody want to join me? Sending it to 2 or 3 people, or just one person that says, hey, I'm thinking of sitting by a campfire later. Would you like to join me? And we can have a pleasant conversation. And I think that is a challenge of mine because as I've hit upon earlier in this episode, like sometimes I don't have the confidence in myself of why would this person want to hang out with me and just me? Like I'd much rather send out a group invite so that like, yeah, Max is going to be there, but I'll have all these other people to talk to as well.
Yeah. I mean, as your friend, I care about you a lot, but I'm not going to respond to that group invite.
I know.
I'm not, but when you invite me, it makes me feel like you want to hang out with me, and so I'm like so much more likely to say yes. So I just being your friend and seeing that, I'm giving you some data to support the decision you're making.
All in. Those are some wonderful devotions.
That's not all in. That's not the point. Just like some people in. All in doesn't work.
Intentional inclusion.
Yes.
Let's give some gratitude to some characters and lift them up before we jump into before we end this episode, and then y'all got to wait on part 2.
Yeah, before we jump into the end.
People are on the edge of their seat, I'm sure, waiting for more of the terminal content.
Hey, some people watched it.
Some people will watch it because of you, Max.
That's probably true.
You can follow me on Twitter, where it is just a plethora of terminal references.
That's so true.
And if
Little Big League references.
Little Big League is likely the next Max's choice.
Yeah.
Love that.
So on
sports,
on top of being grateful for Max and the fact that he is in my life, I am also going to be grateful for someone in the film, and so I'm going to pick Enrique Cruz, Senor Cruz,
played by Diego Luna, if you need it.
Thank you. I didn't, but I'm okay with it. So like he he's an interesting character because it feels somewhat icky in a way that, like, right? Like,
to kind of snake your way into that relationship that way. Snake might be too harsh of a word,
well,
but
I mean, and so maybe I'm being judgmental, but it feels
you're having someone almost spy for information.
and it feels weird. Moral of the story is, if I am generous with that, I have been him, and I've never like spied on anybody with someone. But I've like been in a place where I have so desperately had a crush on someone, and I have just wanted to be closer to them, and I want to know them, and I want to learn about them, and not in a stalkery way. I don't think I've done that, but like I know what it's like to have feelings for someone from afar, and it's very challenging. It's not easy. It's beautiful when it's handled appropriately, and I think that it turns out really well in this movie, and
I just want a connection.
And it's just like that desperate bid for connection. That's exactly right. And I'm really grateful that he has a kind heart, and that he's clearly kind throughout this movie. He helps Victor. He is just he's kind,
He is.
and I'm grateful for that.
And I want to just highlight that proves that like really kind people can also mess up, and
Yeah, exactly.
And we don't spy on people that you have crushes on.
Well, and to be fair,
Don't do that.
I think that had she said no, he would have stopped. I think that's the difference. Like, she played along and answered the questions, and had she not, I think he would have stopped. And so I'm just grateful for him, and I'm grateful for the love that was long unrequited.
Can we talk about the man of mystery versus man of misery bit?
Please.
Yes, but like the moment he says I'm a man of mystery.
He says,
He says I'm a man of misery, great misery.
So Officer Torres is wondering who her secret admirer is, and Victor says, well, he's a man of misery, and Torres is like, oh, you mean man of mystery? And Victor's like, no, like he is miserable. He is so in love, like his heart is so full.
It's a great moment,
man, and it proves he's really capturing English by now.
He is. He went a long way with that. I think that was a great moment.
Who are y'all grateful for?
Max, you want to go?
I'm grateful for Mulroy, who plays I guess he's a TSA agent, but he's part of this cast of characters that Victor gets to know on a I guess a friendship level. It's Enrique. There's Gupta the janitor, and then there's Mulroy, or kind of this group of four that kind of become friends and play poker together. But toward the beginning of the movie, Gupta is very, very suspicious of Victor, assuming he's a spy or he's CIA, and like, why is he in this airport all the time? And
he's pretty suspicious of him, like, even until he gets X-rayed.
Fair. Yeah.
That could not have been healthy, right?
No.
Sending him to an X-ray machine without like a lead
healthy.
jacket, that could not have been healthy.
But we do a lot of talking on this podcast about how can we do a better job of assuming the best in people.
I knew Max paid attention.
Yeah. That's why I said we do a lot of that talking.
He hears the conversation every now and then.
But I think Mulroy is an example of that, where when Gupta is like super suspicious of Victor, Mulroy's the guy who's like, no, like he's probably just a guy like who's in a pretty sticky situation right now. Like, maybe don't be so suspicious of him. Let's think of ways we can actually help him. So I'm grateful that he looks out for Victor in that way when he doesn't need to. And he has the brilliant idea of, you know what, Gupta, if you don't believe me, we can X-ray this guy to make sure he's not wearing a wire or whatever. So I think that is really neat, that he kind of is the person who helps Gupta, primarily Gupta, feel more willing to include Victor in their poker game.
I love that. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, mine.
No, actually.
Well, yeah, we just won't do mine. I really enjoyed the Burger King employees and the extra mile they went, because it could have been so easy for them to say you have to order something and then him not have been able to, and then said, "We'll come back when you're ready to order," and that be it. But they took time to try to understand him and understand what he needed and wanted, and then they were able to support him, and I think that was really beautiful. And I hate Burger King.
Do
I
you?
don't like Burger
When was the
King.
last time you had
Man,
Burger King?
I used to love Burger King as a child.
I just don't think it's
Their
good.
chicken sandwich, the long one.
When was the last time you had
mayonnaise
it? Sunshine?
everywhere.
It's probably been a few years. It's probably been 4 or 5 years.
I had it somewhat recently, and it was pretty good.
I-
And it had been years.
I'm also gonna be real. I
I
haven't
think
been
the
to
last
Burger
time I
King
went
in a
was
long
with you,
time.
Max. I think we went like near your parents' house. There was a Burger King that we like went
Oh.
to.
I remember going like on our way back from the lake house for a staff retreat one time.
That's when I think was the last one for me.
Yeah, it's been a while. I don't like Burger King. So, but I
was
do
like
like their
10 years
employees during that
ago.
moment, and so I just want to give them gratitude because I think those little acts of kindness can go such a long way, and I want to highlight them and give
Sometimes
them
I wish I could just give somebody like $5 and just say, "Give me the best thing you got for $5," which is basically the interaction that Victor and the Burger King employees had.
They gave him so much. 2004, right? Like he got a burger for 74 cents,
Yeah.
It was like a Whopper Junior.
tax.
It was like a Whopper Junior.
but with tax in an airport for 74 cents.
They were being kind. I think that's
I think it was
that's
two-
what I want
might
to
have
be
been
generous
just
of.
2004.
Keep the change. And there wasn't a coin shortage back then.
Man, what a cool opportunity to do this with something that's not Avatar related, that's still very enriching conversation, lots of learning that came from this. What a cool experience.
And this really is only possible because we want to thank our patrons for supporting us to be able to do this, so that we y'all have been amazing. Thank y'all so much for supporting us through this process, so that we can continue to make these podcasts. It's been an absolute blast, and we're gonna keep on doing it. Part 2 coming up next month, so don't miss that. Tune
You
in.
have time to go watch The Terminal.
You can
between
go
now and
watch
then.
The Terminal.
Also, maybe most underrated musical score of all time. I mean, it's John Williams. It's anything he's done.
it's not like this is like an up and comer
Yeah.
musician.
But it bops, my dudes.
I was actually bops is probably a good term. Like it does like bop in a sense of just the way that you almost view someone bopping to it. So
Well,
bop.
I wait for next month's episode.
I still don't think I'm on board with the accents.
I mean, Tom Hanks did one for the
Yeah,
entire
like
movie.
let's be real.
I don't. Tom Hanks is great. I don't necessarily love casting him in this. I wonder if there's someone else that could have casted, but he's good, just for problematic reasons. Anyways, come back next time. Terminal Part 2, right here on Patreon. Thank y'all so much for listening. I'm Sunshine
This
Mayfield.
has been Pruitt.
Oh, I get to do it?
You get to do it now.
And this 6'1" from Raleigh, North Carolina.
He never
Currently a
gets to do this
resident of
again.
He never
Durham.
gets to do it
Never
again.
again.
Elon University,
Oh
class
my
of
God.
2012. Max Gongaware. Thanks for having me.
No more. We just end it after
And
that
that's
next
the
time.
end. Yeah.
Thank y'all. Listen next time. Have a great night.
Goodbye.
Or day. Or whenever you're listening. Bye-bye.